This briefing will introduce you to the principal features of primal and sacral monarchic religions, the religions which characterize hunter-gatherer, horticultural, and early agricultural Bronze Age societies. Hunter-gatherer societies derive all or most of their subsistence from hunting, scavenging, and gathering plants. Contrary to popular opinion, these societies were prosperous, in the sense that people generally spent only about 15 hours per week working, and they rarely wanted for food. They were generally organized on a day-to-day basis into small bands which traveled and hunted together, with a sexual division of labor in which men hunted and women gathered, although this was by no means universal. But there are generally larger kinship structures based on clans which believe they have a common ancestor, and phratries and tribes which group together clans with a common language and religion. Aboriginal Australian societies are probably the most familiar example of surviving hunter-gatherers. This is the context in which we need to understand the principal form of religious expression in hunter-gatherer societies, totemism. Each clan has a distinctive symbol, generally a mineral, plant, or animal, after which it is often named, and which appears on spears, shields, and ritual objects. While most societies have exogamous clans, meaning that people marry outside their clan and thus live in mixed bands most of the time, clans come together annually for a festival. While they do not generally eat the totemic animal or plant during the course of the year, as this animal or plant is considered taboo, it forms the center of a communion feast in which the flesh of the animal is shared, symbolizing the bond between the members of the clan. It was religions of this sort which led Emile Durkheim to develop his theory of religion as collective representation and collective effervescence. The other significant religious form of hunter-gatherer societies is shamanism. Shamanism is what historian of religion Mircea Eliade called a technique of religious ecstasy. Shamans use a variety of methods, including ritual, fasting, and plant medicines known as entheogens, in order to enter into an altered state of consciousness in which they can communicate with the spirit world for the purpose of healing or divination. We should note that both totemic and shamanic elements persist in later religions. Consider, for example, the Christian symbolism around Jesus as the Lamb of God, and the communion ritual which involves consuming the flesh and blood of the Lamb. And essentially all religions have strong mystical traditions which make use of altered states of consciousness as a sort of religious wisdom and spiritual growth. By horticultural societies, we mean societies which have learned to cultivate plants but which do not yet have the plow. Horticultural societies are settled, with people living in villages composed of people from multiple clans. Land is generally owned collectively by the village or its clans, but is usually cultivated in individual family plots, which are frequently redistributed on a periodic basis to ensure at least rough equality. Kinship structures and other associated totemic elements persist, but are overlaid by village-level structures, including both a more formal priesthood and religious societies with shamanic functions, often formed by people who have suffered from and been cured of a particular disease. Many of these societies are matrilineal, and there is a long-standing debate regarding whether or not they are also matriarchal, meaning ruled or led by women. Advocates of this primary matriarchy thesis point to the prevalence of images of pregnant women among the artifacts of early Neolithic horticultural societies, and of goddesses such as Sustinako or thinking women among surviving horticultural societies such as the Keres, a Puebloan group in New Mexico. Critics argue that images of bulls are just as common, and that horticultural societies expanded too quickly for the expansion to be peaceful, suggesting that warfare, not generally a female activity, was important. Regardless of where one stands on this question, goddesses, generally wisdom and fertility goddesses, and culture heroes, gods who taught humanity various technologies, are quite prominent in horticultural societies. Horticulture makes the development of a calendar, so that one can learn when to plant and harvest, essential, and thus encourages astronomic observations. This becomes an important priestly function, and deities associated with the sun, moon, and planets, generally reflecting some gender polarity, begin to be important. While some gods are clearly more important than others, it is difficult to find a well-defined high god. Instead, the creation and governance of the universe is a cooperative process in which different gods, representing different aspects of human creative and social activity, collaborate. As with the religions of hunter-gatherer societies, elements of the religions of horticultural societies persist. Consider the central role of feminine wisdom and compassion figures such as Mary, Guan Yin, Tara, Matangi, etc., in later religions. On the borderline between these horticultural village-level societies and the urban civilizations of the Bronze Age, we find a cluster of very unusual sites, such as Göbekli Tepe, Chaco, and Stonehenge. Göbekli Tepe, in what is now southeastern Turkey, is often called the world's oldest temple, dating to sometime between 9130 and 7370 before the Common Era. The site has circular structures called temene, containing large stone pillars carved with abstract geometric patterns and animal figures. There are also objects resembling totem poles. What is fascinating is that there is no evidence of human habitation at the site, which seems to date before the advent of agriculture in the area, so that it was likely built by hunter-gatherers. It is similar in this regard to Stonehenge, which dates between 3000 and 2000 before the Common Era, and other stone circles and megalithic structures in the British Isles and throughout Europe. These are also likely ritual centers, probably with some astronomical significance, without any clear evidence of human habitation in the immediate vicinity, though in this case the societies which created them were in fact settled and horticultural or even agricultural. Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, which dates to sometime between 900 and 1150 of the Common Era, shows some evidence of limited habitation, but consists mostly of ritual buildings called kivas, a possible astronomical observatory, the Sundagger, and storage facilities. Sites like these suggest that urbanization was driven in part by the emergence of temple complexes which were, at least initially, not themselves permanently inhabited, but which, because they drew people from surrounding villages, eventually became centers for trade, grain storage, and ultimately for an emerging leadership which encouraged the construction of irrigation systems, the development of new agricultural technologies such as the plow, etc. We call this pattern, which is purely hypothetical, archaic. This said, all confirmed urban centers, which began to emerge in earnest around 3000 before the Common Era in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and the Huanghe or Yellow River Valley in China, postdate the emergence of bronze technology. Bronze technology allowed small groups of warlords to conquer surrounding villages and subject them to rents, taxes, and forced labor, creating what we call a tributary social formation. The resulting surplus was then used to support both further conquest, but also the construction of temples, palaces, markets, roads, irrigation systems, etc., and led to the emergence of authentic cities. The religions of these societies show some common characteristics, the most prominent of which is the displacement of goddesses and culture heroes by war gods such as the Canaanite Baal, shown here, whose name means Lord, Master, owner of land, and husband. The local warlord was identified with this god. These were also fertility gods, so that fertility became associated with submission to the local warlord. Eventually, some warlords created small empires like those in Egypt and Mesopotamia and the Huanghe Valley. We call this broader social pattern in which exploiting warlords were identified with the divine, Sacral monarchy. It is from this period that the phenomenon of high gods dates. When human societies have a head honcho, like the warlords and aspiring emperors of the Bronze Age, the universe gets one too. This is not monotheism. High gods like El, Ra, Marduk, and Shangdi presided over pantheons of deities representing a wide range of social functions. And the goddess did not disappear, as witnessed by the presence of deities like Isis, Ishtar, etc. The religions of these societies show some common characteristics, the most prominent of which is the displacement of goddesses and culture heroes by war gods, such as the Canaanite Baal, shown here, whose name means Lord, Master, owner of land, and husband. The local warlord was identified with this god. These were also fertility gods, so that fertility became associated with submission to the local warlord, rendering a rebellion quite unlikely. Eventually, some warlords created small empires like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia and the Huanghe Valley. We call this broader social pattern in which an exploiting warlord or king was identified with the divine, sacral monarchy. It's from this period that the phenomenon of high gods appears to date. When human societies have a head honcho like the warlords and aspiring emperors of the Bronze Age, the universe gets one too. This is not monotheism. High gods like El, Ra, Marduk, and Shangdi presided over pantheons of deities representing a wide range of social functions. and the goddess did not disappear, as witnessed by the presence of deities such as Isis, Ishtar, and the Ashtaroth. The one Bronze Age civilization which may not fit this pattern is the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, which knows no real evidence of religious monumentalization, meaning large temple structures, palaces, or fortification. Instead, we find large pools, which may be ritual baths, or simply swimming pools, and a relatively egalitarian settlement pattern sustained by complex water management technology. Interestingly enough, in the cities of the Indus Valley, we find the statues of goddesses, often dancing, remain dominant. Sometime between 1200 and 1000 before the Common Era, most of these Bronze Age societies either collapsed or experienced social revolutions. This is likely because they had become profoundly oppressive, crushing the creativity of the peoples they had conquered so that technological progress ground to a halt. This is the context in which we will understand the great Axial Age revolutions, such as that which led to the emergence of the Chow in China and of ancient Israel. Finally, we should note that civilizations similar in structure to these Bronze Age societies also developed in the Americas, though along a different timeline and in a way which was less reliant on metal technology, which was used primarily for utilitarian and ceremonial objects rather than weapons. We also find similar civilizations in Africa, though again also on a different timeline, and generally on the basis of access to iron technology.